Welcome back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name's Alicia Sweezer. She defies conventional labels as a scientific psychic and challenges the notion of fitting into predetermined boxes. She has a background as a wildlife biologist and specializes in endangered species. She seamlessly integrates her analytical prowess with her innate intuitive abilities to catalyze profound transformations for her clients. As an animal communicator and medium, she extends her unique skill set to facilitate communication and understanding between humans and their animal companions. Alicia's life is a demonstration of her philosophy that anything is possible. Through her roles as an intuitive life coach, a mentor, psychic, and animal communicator, and three-time best-selling author, she implores others to embrace their authenticity and realize their full potential. Alicia, I want to welcome you onto the podcast.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much. I am actually really excited to be here. And so thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to have you because on my show, we talk a lot about grief around child loss and family loss and around the human aspects of things. But I've yet to talk to somebody who works on this side with pets. And it's something that I've been really curious about because people that have pets, if you have a dog, a cat, or like me, rabbits, and you have cats too, that our little pets are with us for a very long charge of our life. And so they're part of our family, they're not just an animal. And so I'm really looking forward to learning more about what you do today on our podcast and learning more about how our pets are a little bit more than just the animal that's with us in our life.
It is true. That does come up a lot where I'll have sessions and I'll be telling them so many things about their animals and they're like, that explains why they do that, or that's that part of that personality that I didn't really understand, or they only act this way with a certain person. So, one of the really amazing things about animal communication is it just provides so much information. It provides so much context. It provides a lot of validation in some of the things that we see, but we just don't have a framework to sort of explain. And I get to be that bridge. It's the best job ever.
I really love that. And something you just brought up, I've always had this question myself when I see pets is I've seen dogs in particular that I've been around. They either like people a lot or they really don't like them. And they're very clear about who they like and don't like. Are they just very sensitive to certain things that we as people don't see in those
Yeah,
interactions?
very much so. Like one of the things that I always teach and I talk about is that energy really is the universal language. And as humans, we have turned a lot of that off for ourselves, right? There are those of us that we've developed our gifts, but everybody says intuition, whether you count that as your psychic ability, vibes, you walk in a room, whatever that is, but everybody has intuition and feels the energy. Animals, they haven't turned that off, right? That they're not on phones, they're not in society of like having all these distractions. It's very much their survival when they pay attention to the energy. Their behavior then becomes the result of feeling the energy. Like everyone's like, oh, animal behavior. And I'm like, they feel the energy and then that determines their behavior. So, yeah, when someone walks
Mm.
in, regardless of how they may act sometimes, they know. And it's really interesting because it's so funny you asked this because I was just on the phone a couple of days ago with a friend. We had had a session for her dog like 2 months ago. And I told her, I was like, your dog, I said, there's this business associate you have. And I said, she's doing some shady things behind the scenes with your business. And she's like, my dog loves her and loves snuggler. And I was like, she absolutely does. I said, but your dog is showing me there's some stuff going on that she's not okay with that. So just to pay attention, be smart in your business decisions. And she was telling me that it's 2 months later, we were on the phone and she's like, everything happened. She goes, I found out about all these shady things that my business associate was doing, and it's all come to light now. And she's like, the dog knew. So it may not always be instant, but like even the behavior can be sort of confusing sometimes because your dog is loving all over this person. And at the same time, your dog's like, hey, pay attention because there's some stuff going on here. I can feel the energy. There's some things. So it's always the fun part of, like I said, the context of they really know, they really pay attention to the people that you have in your life.
Well, I have to ask you before we get further into the podcast, but how did you stumble upon this gift that you have to communicate with animals? Because in a lot of ways, I had a rabbit for 12 years, and I swear this animal knew more. He knew more things than he would lead on to, is how I always felt about that. But how did you discover that gift that you have?
So it's a pretty funny story. Is I was actually born with the gift, and I was one of those kids who was always outside, just really good with animals. I always knew I wanted to be a wildlife biologist, and I was very fortunate that I was able to achieve that dream, have amazing experiences with elephants and birds and eagles and just all these endangered species that most people never even get to see. So I was so fortunate. And I actually thought being able to talk to animals was a wildlife biologist thing. I thought all wildlife biologists talk to animals because this is what science feels like to me. And when you're born a certain way, you don't know. It's like breathing to me. So I didn't know that not everybody did it. And so I was pretty far, I was like in my 30s. I was pretty far along in my career when one day I said something to, we were out tagging something, and I was like, you guys don't talk to the animals that, we're working on. And they all looked at me with like that dead stare. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go get in the truck now. I'm just going to go stand over there because, yep, this is not a wildlife biologist thing. This is a specific thing to me. And so it was pretty funny from that point on as I really started to look at, oh, this is what I do. Like, this is the fun part. This is how I can talk to my own animals, which anyone listening, just so you know, it can be really challenging to talk to your own animals. Anytime we have any emotional attachment, it just makes things fuzzy. So don't stress if you think, oh, I can't do it because I can't hear my own animals. And sometimes, like mine, because I love bratty animals, they just play around and act like they don't want to talk to you and they can't hear you. So, so yeah, I was a wildlife biologist, and then my life path took a really hard left turn by way of a traumatic brain injury. And along that healing journey of opening my gifts and learning to heal my body, I then opened my business, Who Knew Healing, and started to use my gifts to help pet parents and their animals in all kinds of situations, create better relationships, and provide healing and peace of mind.
That's truly incredible. And I remember you sharing a story about a cat that you got recently. I remember you told me that this little animal just you had a premonition, so to speak, of connecting with this animal. And when you first met it, too, by the way, you knew that was the one. I'd love for you to share that story because that was really beautiful.
Absolutely. So we're talking about Romeo, who is my current little kitty cat, who is to be 2 years old soon, my little crazy. So yeah, one night it was about 6 months after my last cat, Pip, had transitioned. And like you and I talked about, this was the first time I hadn't had an animal in decades. It was just this sort of strange space to be in. And also, I really needed the time to recover because he was my life partner. And so one night I had this dream, and it was one of those lucid dreams where you're awake in them. And I had walked in off of this balcony, like I was in this corporate office building, and there was little Romeo sitting on this really high counter. And I said, no. And he laid down and said, my name is Romeo. And I went, dang it. And that was the dream. And I woke up the next morning. I felt completely different. Like a lot of the grief and the what ifs and sort of the tiredness had dissipated. And I went and got all my cat stuff out of storage. I set everything up. I waited for him to show up because he's talking to me the whole time. I could feel him so close because I'm a feeler. I even had a friend check. I was like, am I crazy? And she's like, nope, he's right there. And so I had to wait 2 months for him to show up, which in that time started to think I was going crazy, even for myself, because he was talking and showing me pictures. And I'm like, where are you? Like, this is ridiculous. I put the carrier in my truck because I thought, I was like, I'm gonna walk out into some random parking lot and there's gonna be this little kitten sitting there. And then a friend of a friend posted a picture on Facebook of some stray kitties that she had taken in from her yard, and I saw his picture and I just started to sob. It was like the most ugly cry you had ever seen because I was like, who has my child? And I called the woman and she was like, yep, I have him. We chatted for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. A couple days later, I went and picked him up. She's now is an amazing friend of mine. And I found out that he was only a week old when I had that dream. So I had to wait for him to finish growing before he could actually come to me and, be with me physically. So, and I don't do a lot of dream stuff. There are a lot of intuitives, like they get a lot of information through their dreams. And one, I don't really sleep a lot. So it was interesting that that's how he came to me, not just, my normal walking around, how they usually show up. So
That's
it's my little baby. I love him. He's crazy.
And I remember you telling me Romeo's a little bit of a crazy, crazy little kitty. He likes to roam around and destroy things.
A little bit. He has two modes, sleeping and chaos. So, and but I love him. I love him that way. I'm obsessed with him. So I wouldn't have him any other way except when he's chewing something he's not supposed to.
Well, that's what I share about rabbits is that they look soft, cute, and fluffy. And yes, they do sleep about 16 hours of the day, but that other remaining part of the day is destruction and eating and getting a little crazy. So I share that with you with little Romeo.
Yep. They're like, we're going to
Um,
take over the world when we're awake.
Well, my wife was wanting to expand their cages recently, and I said, the thing with rabbits is you give them more space, and they have this really unique way of saying, well, it's not enough. I need a little bit more and a little bit more. And eventually they take over. So,
Well,
um,
they're training you slowly, is what they're doing. Because they go, if we come in and say all of this is ours, the humans are going to freak out. So we're like, we just need a little bit more. We just need a little bit more. And so a lot of humans don't realize, and I'm not saying this is you, but a lot of humans don't realize when they're actually being trained by their animals. And it's really funny. Um, a lot of people, they get really upset when they realize they've been trained by their cat. They're okay being trained by their dog, but when they realize they've been trained by their cat, they get super mad.
well,
It's
it's funny with my one rabbit, Finn. I call him Finn, and his name is ironic because he's just crazy. I mean, he runs like he'll run so fast you can't even keep. It's like a little tiny blur running across the floor. But if he gets into trouble and I pick him up and I'm like, dude, stop chewing the carpet or something, he just like licks your nose, and it's always this like get out of jail free card thing that he's somehow learned how to work through the process with. Um,
Mhm.
Alicia, I wanted to ask you, when people come to work with you and they have pets, do you have animals in specific that you work with more than others, or do you commonly see cats or dogs, or do you work with an array of different pets that people have?
Well, I'm pretty fortunate is that I do get an array. The only thing I won't, I have the ability, but I don't work with spiders because I'm
Hmm.
afraid of spiders. So uh, even though one of my spirit guides is a 6 foot spider, if you don't think the universe has a sense of humor, I will tell you that it does. Um, but I work with I have fish, I have horses, I have cats, dogs, lizards, birds. The majority of it is cats and dogs because that's, sort of our population, right? Society. Those are the two main animals that we have. But I get a whole array of them. And I love that part. If I could get more people out there to be like, doesn't matter what you have, except for the spiders, like, let's have a chat. Let's see what's going on.
So
So.
now, when you meet with somebody to do, I'll call it a pet reading because I'm not sure what to call that, but when you meet somebody with their pet, how does that work with working with you when they bring their pet in? Does the pet oftentimes give you energy or give you a feeling before the owner starts talking, or is it like the other way around?
No, it's all done virtually. And so I do it through Zoom and I have animal clients all over the world. So it's really great that with technology we can reach even more people. And part of the reason, because I get this question a lot, the part of the reason we do it virtually is because if I were to come into your home, your animal's going to act different because there's
Oh.
someone in the house. So like dogs are going to want to play and we want the session to be, calm and so we can have a conversation and not be distracted. And if I'm in your home, it's a whole different experience. And so that's why we do it virtually and your animal actually doesn't even have to be with you because I just need a picture that gets me through everybody when I open the doors up because a ton of animals always come in and then that's it from that point on. And it's funny because as soon as someone reaches out and they schedule, their animal starts talking to me. And I'll be like doing the dishes and they'll be chatting. I was like, you got to wait for the session. You have to, because I'm in the middle of something. I was like, I'm not fully listening. And so I can't take notes on what you're saying right now. So you have to wait for the session. And they're like, fine. And they'll hang out, which is fabulous. Like, I know it, what a problem to have is that I get all these animals to come and talk to me all the time. And so I always have to just direct them like you got to wait until the time when we're all together and then I create this sacred container the pet parents come with questions because animals do better with specific questions. And because if you ask them how they are, they're going to say fine, regardless of their gender. They're the women of the world. You know how us women are. If you ask us, we're like, we're fine. And so more specific questions allows us to get through those doors a little bit better. And then it's very much in the flow. Questions come up when we're in the session, but because my two strongest clairs are knowing and feeling, so I'm claircognizant and clairsentient, and then sight and sound are right behind. I get a lot of feelings and knowing and energy, and and we always work at the pace of the animal and where they want to start. So I'll have like a whole list of questions, and I'll ask the animal like, "Where do we begin?" And they'll pick one, and that's where we go, and then we're off
Oh.
to the races.
So now, do you work with pets that are here physically in this world, or do you also help families that lost a pet that's transitioned?
I do both. So I'm an animal communicator and an animal medium, because not all animal communicators are mediums, just like all traditional human psychics are not mediums. And so it's this category of when you're looking to find someone that can support you, these are sort of the things you want to look for. It's like, are they a medium? If yours is transitioned, do they do energy work? Because that is one of the things I do also. And that goes on in the sessions if they're animal, like if we've got some medical stuff or some behavioral or just trauma. I can do a lot of energy work while we're having the conversation, and that shifts and heals the animal at the same time. So those are some of the categories when you're looking at what is it that you want when you're on Google, those are the things to look for.
That's incredible. And I've always wondered too, when a pet passes on, what are some things that have come up with you in those sessions when someone comes to you and like, for example, if I was to come to you and say, Finley passed last year with cancer, what are some things that come through with that? Do our pets, do they tell us that they miss us? Do they tell us, that they didn't pass in a bad way? I've always been curious, if animals communicate those kind of messages.
They absolutely do, and it's one of the things, that is just so very dear to my heart, and if I wanna change it for everyone out there that is in this situation, because we carry so much of it around as humans, and our animals never want us to feel guilt. They never want us to be stressed about, life path sort of things. Animals are really matter of fact about life and death. Like, there are so many things as humans we could learn from them because they know they're coming in with they have a contract, they have a beginning date and an end date. And for them, because they know death's not real, it's just a transition, they don't stress about it like we do. They don't do all of these things to sort of prolong their life, and all of these methods as humans do. And so when they transition, they absolutely have messages of, you know, like I said, a lot of humans will have guilt or stress or worry. Did I do the right thing? Was it the right time? And so we're able to provide that information and have their pet parent have that relief because that's what our animals want. They also deliver messages on what it looks like when they come to visit. So that which is specific to every family and every pet parent. So they'll give very specific things on you'll know when I'm there visiting. It'll be a sensation or you'll feel them doing something around your body or something in a particular room or you will hear something. So that helps pet parents heal in the process also. And one of the things that comes up is if the animal transitioned abruptly because that's really really hard for our us as humans where it's like oh say someone got hit by a car or medically right they just got a diagnosis and within say 36 hours the transition happened and as animals they don't there's so many times that they believe that abruptness is better they don't understand because 'cause they're not human and right? They're not having a human experience that it's actually really hard on us as humans because 'cause they're like, "No, but it was quick and nobody had to suffer." And so I get to facilitate those messages from the animals to their pet parents and allow that healing to go on and to release that trauma because it is very traumatic for us pet parents that are left here behind. And a lot of times there's so many messages they give, they totally turn into like teacher mode also. Some of them actually sign up as spirit guides for you. Others, they're like, listen, you got homework, you got relationship stuff going on. Here's what I'm going to tell you to do about that. That job, we're going to talk about that. So it's really cool that they fall into teacher mode also.
Well, that's what, that was what was so hard for me last year in September was I had a rabbit for 12 years and I'm very grateful, by the way, I had one for 12 because most die between 6 and 8. So you're lucky to get anything over 10. Um, But it was hard because my little guy got cancer and there wasn't anything we could do. And
Mhm.
I've heard that now with rabbits you can get them chemo and radiation, all this stuff. And I was saying, at what point am I torturing this animal? I mean, this is really boiling down to quality of life.
Mhm.
And I remember the day that we had to put him down just because his body gave out, and I didn't want him to suffer. And I love what you said that animals are matter of fact, but for me, that was really hard because euthanizing an animal, something that's been in your life for 12 years, is now gone. And then what felt weird in that moment was that I knew it was right to put him down, but at the same time, I felt like I was taking his life at the same time. And that was such a hard decision for me. And I still have a lot of pain with that just because little guy was there for me through so many things in life. And I was really grateful for everything this animal gave to me. So I've always wondered, when we do euthanize an animal like that in that situation, because we don't want them to suffer, do they have pain with that? Do they look up, frown upon us, for lack of a better term, that we did that? I've been curious to know if you've gotten any messages with that through readings.
Absolutely. And having lived through it myself also, it's like one of those things I used to say to people, I was like, can't you just go in your sleep? Like, please don't make me have to go and like do this, because it was same thing. He was diagnosed with diabetes. He didn't want to do insulin and all that. So for 3 months, I just kept him as comfortable. And we went through that, and then at the end, he was like, "Nope, you're gonna have to do this." And I'm like, "Ah," because he was always my teacher. I learned so much in it, and now I get to help other people. Like, I understand why he did it after the fact, but in those moments, it's really, really challenging. So the thing is that, and it's funny as I went to say this, I felt all the people like sort of perk up, and the energy was like, because it's true. When we are able, because in your instance, right, your animal was sick, their body was giving out. They're not able to transition their body. So when we go through the euthanasia process, it's actually a gift to them because they're like, I want to go. It's time for me to go. I just don't have enough strength, whatever it is for them to go ahead and finish transitioning their body. So when we do that for them and we allow them to be released and go back into infinite being form, it's a huge gift that we give them. And that is so the opposite of what society says euthanasia is. And that's why I was like, I felt everybody like, oh, I don't know. And it's true because for myself and so because the majority of my business is end of life medical, these kind of situations. And it's true. They're like, please just help me. Because then they have relief. They can cross over, they can come back to visit, they're not in pain. And that process, because a lot of times they've already started to leave their body, and so you really are just transitioning the physical form. They don't
Mm.
feel it as far as like um, causing them energetic or spiritual pain or anything like that. They've already separated from their body in that aspect. And so we're just transitioning the body. And it's a huge, huge gift for them.
Well, I think that's what was so hard when I went through that is that my little rabbit, he was all there in the head. I
Yep.
mean, I am not joking, all the way up to the last minute. He was all there up here, but his body just gave out. And he stopped eating. He was struggling to walk. I just was like, God, I can't make an animal suffer. I just can't do it. Like, so I find that interesting that you have that perspective that it's a gift. And ultimately, I think you're right about that. I mean, I really do. I think that for us to suffer in the end like that is very traumatic. And I think even animals, I do feel like animals feel pain. I mean, I really know that they do. Um, but for us, like you said, I think that is a big gift when we know that timing's right. And I think that's, the vet that we had, I was really grateful that she was a rabbit, exotic vet that knew rabbits extremely well. She's had over 10 rabbits herself. And I remember her telling me, she said, you guys made the right choice, the right decision, and you timed it right. She said, I can't describe to you how many people come in and do this sooner than they should, or they wait too long and the animal suffers. And she said, I only know it because I've been around them so long and have been a vet tech, or not a vet tech, but a veterinarian for a very long time that when you time that right for an animal, it's truly a gift.
Mhm.
So,
Yes,
but
it's very, very much so. And that's one of the things that um there two things I want to speak to on that is like a lot of times, and these are some of the pet parents I get. And like you said, all yours was all there mentally, right? Like there's lots of checklists out there that people have made, and we're super grateful for those of like when do you know it's time, right? And you look and it's like they've stopped eating, they're not moving around as much, but when they're still there, like you look in their eyes, right? And they're still there, and sometimes they're still playing a little bit. That's where it gets really confusing. And you know, sometimes we have really strong-willed animals, and that spark never goes away. Like like, what was happening with you, you're like, "He's still in there," but his body was deteriorating such to a place that, he wasn't gonna be happy. So, it can be really confusing for pet parents sometime when they're like, "But he's still there. That spark is still there. How do I do this?" And I'm like, "That spark is them. Like, that's their infinite being." And so, that doesn't change. I mean, it gets dimmed in other animals that maybe aren't, as sort of willful, right? And those checklists are great because they work for them. But then there's some that it gets real confusing because 'cause they're like, "They're not following the checklist. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." And animal communication could be a really helpful tool in those situations because it can be confusing. So just know that if your animal's not fitting into that checklist, it's okay. If you see that they're still there, but their body is deteriorating, chances are they're wanting to go, and it's okay. So the euthanasia is a gift in that. And so, and the timing, it's, one of the things I always say is don't wait. Like I get that for a lot of people, animal communication is still weird and woo woo and I get it. I was a scientist. Like I totally understand that. And what if you had the information? Like, so don't wait. Use it as a tool in the toolbox with your vet and your dog trainer and your behaviorist and your acupuncturist. Like, that's all we are is just another tool in the toolbox. So if you have that information up front, say you have 3 months left with your animal, imagine what that 3 months looks like. If you know that they don't want to have chemo, if you know what their wishes are, you don't have to stress of like, is this what they want? What, for you can just have 3 months or whatever time you have of the joy and the happiness and the relief knowing. And especially if there's any financial part in it, which really comes into play, if you know they don't wanna have those treatments, you don't have to worry about that either.
Yeah, I think that's what was really hard. What rabbits, not a lot of people know this, so I'm going to share it. Rabbits, birds, snakes, lizards, animals like that, they're all considered exotic because they're
Mhm,
outside of the realm of cats and dogs. And so, what makes it hard when you have an exotic pet is those vet bills go real high, real fast. Because, and sometimes what's really sad in the animal world too, by the way, is you oftentimes end up in an emergency situation with a vet who doesn't see rabbits, who doesn't see these animals, and really can't help. And it's not their fault, by the way. They just aren't experienced with it. And so that can be a real trick in those situations about, what quality of life are you going to determine at that point? I know for me, when I found out my rabbit had cancer, my immediate reaction was, what can we do to fix it? And it became that thing of, yes, you can do radiation, you can do chemo, you can do these things. They're going to cost you thousands of dollars. And then on top of that, the more important one for me is what's the quality of life of this
mhm,
animal? Because if I'm going to torture this animal because I want it to stick around for my own selfish needs, and this thing ends up in pain, suffering, in a worse off situation because we did those things, I didn't just waste money. That's even beside the point. But I put
mhm,
this animal's life in worse condition for them, and they're suffering now. And that's where I think a lot of people, like you said, we humans have big hearts. We all do. I know we do. And we don't want to say goodbye. We don't want to be in that place. It's a very scary place because we're giving up what we're used to. And I think that's what's a really hard decision in that area of pet loss is yes, there's a cost involved in it, but it's also quality of life. And how do we balance that? And I think that
mhm,
it's really important to find, after talking to you, by the way, I've had this new perspective when I get to that place again, because I will. I want to talk to somebody like you at that point. I want to get that. I don't care that people think it's woo woo. I live in woo woo land a lot. So, take your beliefs as you are. It's fine. But I'd love to be able, I wish I would have had that resource of you at that point. I wish I would have. And also, I think it's important to find a vet who is very, very knowledgeable about your specific pet. If you have a rabbit like I do, find a rabbit specific vet that knows to look for those signs and knows what that road looks like for you and can give you that advice to say, I know you can spend thousands of dollars, you can do all this stuff over here, but you're going to put them in a place where it's suffering and not quality of life. So I think it's important to have those conversations with your pet when the time comes.
I absolutely agree, and I love that you were able to find a vet. Like you said, they're called exotics, and it can be challenging sometimes, but depending on where you live in the country, right? Certain states, and if you're rural, it's even harder to find one that is an exotic. And so, even I used to have horses. Finding the right horse vet to fit your quirky animals. There's a lot, but it's like you got to find one that works with and you have the relationship with. And I'm so thrilled that you were able to find that because it's not always easy. And I grew up with all my mom was huge into birds. We had 6 parrots. I had a ferret. I had a turtle. We had cats and dogs. We had all kinds of stuff. And so, yes, the exotic pets we did visit as well. So,
Well, well, I think it's cool to find a good vet because with my first rabbit, I never really had a vet. I never took him to the vet until like the last 2 years of his life because the poor thing never had a problem. Which I'm very grateful for, by the way, because rabbits are very expensive. I'll just say that.
yes,
Um, but at the same time, after he passed, and I saw what my vet did for me and how that she guided me. I love Paulette. She's a beautiful vet, and she's just got a big heart for rabbits. That's why I love her as a vet. But when we talked about getting another rabbit, she said, "Don't forget about me. Keep me in mind." And sure enough, I'll just say, since we're talking in the animal side of things today, that finding a good vet that gives a damn about your animal, I'm not kidding, guys. I don't care if it even costs you $100 or $200 more. It is worth it, so much worth it, to get a vet who has a heart. Because when I went and adopted my two new rabbits I have, they were only 2 months old, and I never had baby rabbits. I rescued Finley from a crappy, scary home when he was 9 months old, and I had to do a lot of rehab work with him the first 2 years of life. But these guys were brand new, and it felt really good to just call the vet and say, "Hey, I've got two new rabbits. I know how do I do this process?" And to have a vet that works alongside you to help educate you on how the animal works, how they function. I learned a lot about rabbits' digestive tracts, their behaviors. You've had lots of animals too, Alicia, so you know all about their little quirks, their little nuanced behaviors that I think a lot of people don't know about pets too. And I'd love for you to share this part. Um, Pets like rabbits don't come out and say, "Hey, I'm hurt. Hey, I'm not feeling good." They kind of hide it. And you have to look for those little subtle behaviors they do.
absolutely. And there's a huge difference between, and I'm fortunate because this is where the wildlife biologist part comes in. Kind of what makes me unique in this world is that I can explain these kind of behaviors. And like, so bunnies, rabbits, right? They're prey animals. They're very different than a cat or dog, which are predators. And so the behaviors are going to be different. And I think you and I talked about this when we were chatting before. And that, like with horses are prey animals. They're 1,200-pound chickens, that will run you over at a plastic bag that blew 6 miles away. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you love them, but you're like, what are we doing here? Like, did you have to act like you were going to die? Um, and vet bills are very expensive for horses as well. It's like they know, they're like, "Imma stick my leg." "No, that's a vet bill. Don't put your leg there." But it's one of those things that it's different. We approach them differently. Your behavior with them is very, very different, which is why horses are used in a lot of therapy because they are so sensitive to energy and they pay because they're a prey animal, just like your bunnies. They're food. So their
Mm.
senses are on high alert all of the time. So where you can like walk up to a dog and just be like, "Hey," bunnies and horses are like, "Whoa, what? Mm-mm, there is no you just walking up to me and saying, 'Hey.'" And I love that about you in the conversations where you're like you learned that. You learned the nuances of how to approach them, especially with the rehabbing part of going slow and paying attention to your energy and knowing when like I said, specifically in the prey animals, when their behavior just changes a little bit. Because you're right, they don't come out and go, "I'm super sick." But you'll notice like well, they're not going to the same spot in the room like they normally do, or they're they're just sitting kinda different, or, like me with Romeo, I'm like, "His ear looks weird." You know what I mean? He'll be like, "What?" And I'm like, "Your ear looks weird. I look at you enough, your ear just looks weird." And so I go over and I check his ear. So I love that you are, that kind of pet parent, but it is very true on depending on the kind of animal you have, your relationship looks different with them, your energy looks different with them, how you approach them is all very, very different, and there's a huge difference between prey animals and predators.
Yeah, Finn got a tummy ache earlier this week, and I only caught it because he was flipping over a lot. He'd flip over, lay down, flip over, lay down. He was doing this every like 30 seconds. And after having a rabbit for 12 years, I was like, okay, little man's either got gas or some kind of blockage or something. And sure enough, I picked him up, and usually he'll like run around kind of thing. He laid in my arms, and so I knew. I said,
Mm.
okay, little guy's got a stomach ache. And so I had to massage his stomach for about a good 15 minutes to help him pass all that air. And he went right back to life, by the way, half hour later. But
Yeah.
again, if you don't know to look for those weird little things that these little guys do, you never know. And so I love that you share that passion too for looking out for those little weird nuances.
Thank
Um,
you.
I wanted to ask you, when you do readings for people with their pets, what are some of the most common questions that you get in these interviews?
So a lot are, sort of end of life, like they have an animal that isn't doing so well, and we know we've reached the twilight period of their life, and so they want to know what their animal wants, how can they make them comfortable, what their wishes are, if there is a diagnosis, do they want treatment, which treatments, and then we talk a lot about like what that path will look like and what their animal requests are. Because like sometimes they want pain medication, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they
Mm.
want, you know, anti-inflammatories because that's one of the things, with the medical side of things is I can run down the list and I can ask them, like, what's a match? Is this what you want? Is this particular medicine a match for your body? Do we want to go natural? Do we want to go prescription? Is CBD? Like we run through all of that kind of thing to get the animal the resources that they want. And so we get a lot of twilight phase, what does this look like? I get a lot of just got medically diagnosed and everybody's freaking out and we don't know what we're going to do. We don't know what the animal wants. We don't know kind of like, can I afford the chemo or, um, and so that's sort of the second huge group. The other ones are a lot of rescues, behaviorally, we're doing some trauma recovery. We get an animal from a rescue or like your bunny who was, in a situation and now we have some behavioral things going on. We got some separation anxiety, we got reactive dogs, we got cats that are hiding. And so we work through, it basically looks like counseling for the animals because they finally have a safe place to be vulnerable and talk about those experiences and give most of the time really specific directions for their new pet parent on this is how you can help me. And that's one of the cool things about animal communication as a tool, like with your dog trainers and stuff. It's like, especially with reactive dogs or separation anxiety, they'll give real specific things. And so you then know how to incorporate that with your trainer who's trying to teach you like the things they know. And then it's a specific plan for your specific animal. And so those can be super, super helpful. And a lot of times there's some energy work that goes in there. If I can work on their nervous system, if I can calm down their pain, along with some of the medical diagnosis. I do a lot of energy work on cancer. I have a few cancer dogs at the moment, and we do some sessions that just bring them comfort on as they're moving through their process. The other ones we get are like I had one this morning, and I was like, oh, here's exactly because I had said out loud a little while ago of like, there's a group of there's so much of society of I get a lot of people after they've tried everything else, or they're just at the end and they're like, I don't know what else to do. And I'm like, how do I reach them earlier? Because that can change so many things. And that's what my client was this morning. She's like, nothing is tragically wrong. Like, we're not sick. She goes, but there's just a few things that I think they could be better. I think he could be happier. I think our relationship, if I did this. And we had a fabulous chat. And the dog was like, yeah, this, la, 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 la. And she's like, "Now I know what to do." And so nothing was horribly wrong, but now it's gonna be better. So, like, what if, because in society, we're taught so much like, "Oh, it's okay, just suck it up, tolerate it." But if you're at work and you're worried that your dog is chewing through the wall, neither of you are happy. You're stressed, they're stressed, and it's like, what if you had that information and you could change that? And so that's the other sort of group that I get. I think those are the biggest ones. I'm trying to think. I was like this
That's
and that one, and uh,
that's incredible. And what are the responses like with the people that you work with when you share this information about their pets with them? What's kind of response do you get from them?
there's so much. There's a lot of relief. There's a lot of gratitude. There's a lot of like, I knew that a lot of validation where they're like, I knew something, but I just didn't know. And they're like, now I know what that is. And I'm like, yes. And like this morning's client, it was very much about, you know, her relationship with her partner. There was some things going on
Mm.
and that their animal was responding to that. And so it wasn't so much that the dog was having issues, it's like there's some stuff going on in the household and now the dog is having issues. So we chatted about her relationship and that's the cool part is like I'm actually a people life coach and mentor and so I get to do the human side at the same time, and because we just never know where it's gonna go, like, our animals bring us here for a reason, and but there's just so much relief. I would say that's probably the biggest thing is, like, relief and then validation and gratitude and joy and happiness of, like, now I know, and and also being seen and heard like our animals are, but also the human in that. Because, like, you and I kinda talked about, particularly in the grief space, people are like, "Oh, it's just an animal." If one transitions, and it's like, "No, it's not." Grief is so much different, and so even just talking about things that are going on in the household that are affecting your animals, it changes everything. And so, yeah, I would say those are the biggest things is relief, gratitude. I'm not crazy. I knew something was going on. And now I know what
Well,
that little quirky thing is and why they're doing that. Um, so yeah.
Well, I think that, we as people, and I think everybody has this gift, but we all bury it a lot with societal influence and pressure on how we think and believe and our constructs of mindset. I think we all have intuition built into ourselves. And I think, just like you said, there's always this feeling I had, like with my own pet, I was like, this thing is not just a rabbit. For some weird reason, I can't even put my finger on it, but I'm like, the way his behaviorism is, the way he looks at me, like it seems like a person for some reason. Because he was able to pick up if I was having a bad day or something. He knew I was having a bad day. He knew it right out the gate, and he was always there to comfort me. He also like knew that when he wasn't doing well, I knew to come to him, and so I feel like we have an intuitive bond with our pets, like we do. And I think a lot of people they know that they just don't acknowledge it half the time. And I'd love for people to feel safe enough to do that. Because like you said, I think there's always this intuition guiding us and telling us what we need to hear and see with our pets. My big question I have for you as we get wrapping up on the podcast is, and I'm gonna jump a little bit into the woo-woo space. So if you guys are, comfortable with that or not, just let me know. Um, when our pets cross over and when we eventually cross over, will we see our pets again at that point? If they shared that with you?
Yeah, absolutely. If they haven't chosen to reincarnate and come, go wherever and have another lifetime, they absolutely are there. Just like all the people, right? We're infinite beings. And so when we cross over, unless they've chosen to go do something else, they are there. And so you get to meet up with everybody. And it's always so funny because whether it's people or animals, once they cross over, there's the best way I can sort of describe it is like there's some orientation that goes on. Like they got to remember they're like, oh yeah, we're back here and sometimes more with people than animals, there's still some spiritual work that needs to be finished. Like there's still, so they do that on the other side. And so a lot of times animals will be like, look, I gotta go do some stuff for like 2, 3 days and then I'll be back to visit. But I gotta like go get oriented and hang out and see everybody and then I'll be back. And but they absolutely are there unless they've chosen to go do something else. And we talked, I think we talked, I don't know, about sometimes we all have animals and then we have those specific animals where the connection just feels a little bit different. And if you have multiple animals at the same time, as humans, we start to feel bad of like, oh my God, I feel like I love this one more than that one. And it's like, no, it's just a different type of connection. And so we talk about soul family. And so there are, don't know what everyone's spiritual beliefs are, but mine are you have multiple lives, reincarnation, we're infinite beings. And so you can have multiple lifetimes with people, animals, creatures, all of the things. And there's also a group that you travel through time with. And that's our soul
Mm.
family. And animals, people, creatures, all the things are part of that. So when you have that particular connection where you're like, I've never had this with an animal before, that's a soul family connection. That's why it's different. It's not better or worse. You don't love them more than your others, like you're not supposed to have a favorite kid, all that kind of stuff. It's just a different type of connection and it's soul family. So they absolutely are there when you cross over, unless they decided to go have another adventure.
Well, knowing Finley, I'm sure he's having an adventure because that little rabbit loved to explore. Nothing was off limits.
He's
But
he's he's quite he's hanging he's totally listening, just so you know. He's like, and he has it, he he wants to you're such a little goober. He he with Finn's your boy that you have now, right?
yep.
Yeah. So he comes and does stuff with him and like sort of is mischievous and teaches him some things kind of like in a big brother, you know, go have some fun, go do this, go chew that kind of way. So, Amelia is so very sweet that there's not a lot. He's like, I want to mess with her like as a big brother. He goes, but she's just too sweet. He's like, I just can't. So he watches you guys. He hangs out and he very much is always paying attention to how you're doing. So he's there
Uh,
if you ever want to talk to him. Like you don't need me. You have chats with him. He's there listening.
well, I always think about that little stinker. He left a footprint on my world. And that would explain why Finn is such the rambunctious, like wild child. We thought about renaming him when we first got him, and he just got into so much mischief, and he was absolutely crazy. And I said, I don't know why, but Finn just works. I said he's like Finley on steroids for some
Yep.
reason. So,
And when Finn comes to visit, it's both of them like just getting really riled up. And because, Amelia and Finn can see Finley. So they're just
hmm.
like, oh, he's here. We're gonna go play and we're gonna act all nutso. And so when Finn gets a little extra, Finley's there.
That's too funny. I have to ask this at the end of the podcast here, but do our pets that say we have a pet that we lost and then we adopt some new pets, they're able to see the pets that we lost?
What do you Oh, the ones that are here in body, can they see ones in spirit? Yeah, animals, they
Yeah.
have that ability. So, yeah,
Wow.
animals can see. I mean, when Pip was alive, he was my guide on if some, because we talk about entities, right? Spiritual attachments, like this is all super woo-woo for anybody who's listening, the deep psychic part. Um, but there are things and they're low vibration and high vibration. And if one got in the house, because I sage, I do all the things, right? He would always let me know because he would go bang on the bathroom cabinets.
What?
It doesn't matter what house I lived in, when something got in the house, he would go bang the bathroom cabinets, and it's the only time he ever did that. And so I would be like, "Oh, time to sage the house. Something got in." Uh,
Oh
and
my
cats
God.
specifically are real adept at seeing everything. But no, animals, they have that ability to see anything. So
That's
they don't turn it
incredible.
off. You know, humans on this planet, we have huge egos and our arrogance of we think we're the best species. And the truth is like we really not. We've turned off so many things and we don't do so many of the gifts that we have. And animals still have those. And so, yeah, they see when they visit, they know something's in your house, they can tell you. They see all the things.
That's incredible. God, I thank you for sharing that. You just kind of opened my eyes today on this episode, talking about animal spirits and our way to communicate with them. And I just think you're doing some beautiful work in an area that's very misunderrepresented and something that I feel is a very, very big need for those of us who have pets. Because like I said, I wish looking backwards where I was last year, I wish I had somebody like you that was on that journey with me at that point, because I think that I would have found a lot more comfort and a lot more solace in where that journey was going. And I would have, not to say that takes away emotional things of it, because it's not going to, but it's going to help you better process and understand, what really goes on with that with pets. Alicia, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and talking about being an animal communicator and talking about the spiritual aspects of having a pet, because like I've said a lot in the last 2 seconds, but I just feel like it's a very underrepresented area of our life. And these little creatures are with us for anywhere from 5 to 25 years, 30 years if you have a bird. Um, I mean, they're there for a long time of our life. And I think for us to better understand our connection with them and their purpose walking this life with us is so meaningful. So I just want to say thank you on that front.
Oh, thank you so much for having me and having that perspective also because it is very much my passion and my purpose of like this can be different. My animals are my whole world and particularly in the grief space. Yeah, like when Pip was transitioning, I was like, "Where I need someone like me because it's really hard when," and I tried and I didn't have great experiences. So do your homework when you're looking for an animal communicator. And um and I thought to myself, I was like, "How do people do this without someone like me? Like how do they go through this?" And so thank you for speaking to it because it can be so different. And if I can have all the pet parents out there have it be different, then, my life's purpose would be fulfilled and I can go, transition and have another adventure somewhere else because my job would be done here. So thank you so, so much for having me. Thank you for the work that you do because I think that the change that you're making on this planet with your life path also is super, super important. And I'm grateful for you being here as well.
Well, Alicia, I really appreciate that. And I usually wrap up the podcast asking my guests a couple questions. My first one I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to target this specifically to where you live in on your life journey. But if there was something you could share with our listeners today who have pets and are going through the grief with a pet, or maybe stuck in grief after losing a pet, what's one thing you would share with them to help them navigate that journey just a little bit easier?
Well, one, like, don't wait, don't suffer. Like, whether you're sort of pre-grief because your animal, you've gotten a medical diagnosis or they've already transitioned and you're still in those throes of the grief, it's like, don't wait. Talk to somebody, talk because we're talking about animals here. Find an animal medium because your animal wants to help you with that grief and those what ifs and did I's and the shoulds and the self doubt. Like they don't want you to have that. So choose it for yourself because your animal wants you to have it. I promise you they do. And this isn't like whether it's me or someone else, just find someone because the information changes your life. Your animal does not want you to spend 1 second more suffering then you have to because you don't have the information. So please just I get that it may be weird, but for once in your life, just choose weird and it will change your life.
I love that. That's the best bit of advice I've heard here on the ending. I wanted to also ask you if people listen to this episode today and they want to connect with you, and by the way, listeners, I'm just going to say it, connect with Alicia. She's an awesome woman. I'm just going to put that out there. How can they get in touch with you?
So my website is Who Knew Healing. Facebook, Instagram, those are sort of the biggest places to find me. And yeah, reach out. My website has a ton of information. I worked really hard on that. So any questions you have, go there, read. I have Google reviews, all of those things to sort of give you a sense of who I am. And the other thing too is like if you're listening to this and you aren't having any challenges right now, but you know of a pet parent who is, please share the episode. I mean, share all of Chris's episodes because they're fabulous. Like this man, like I said, the work you're doing, I'm so grateful for. But it's like pass it on because you never know who's going to be able to use it. So, like I said, it's done virtually all over the world. Life has enough stress. Stressing about your animal doesn't have to be one of them. So reach out.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I want to thank our listeners today for joining Alicia and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Alicia's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Spotify. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.